Good evening. Welcome to the May meeting of the Gungahlin Community Council. Thank you for those of us who turned up in person and those of you who have joined online. My name is Peter Alford. I'm the President of the Gungahlin Community Council, joined by other members of the executive, Luke and Dave and Prasad, and Kevin and Henley will be along shortly. We have apologies from Minister for Transport and Member for Yerrabee, Megan Fitzharris. Do we have a sign-in sheet? Secretary's not present. I think the Secretary's actually watching online to take minutes. So we'll assume that everyone else is able to report here.
I might get a sign-in sheet up the back on the way out.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Dave. We've got quite a full agenda tonight. We've got two invited speakers. Ben McHugh is from, I keep saying ACT Roads, but it's not ACT Roads, but he'll be self-introducing. He's done this before. We've got then three small segments in the middle of the evening where we'll just give a little bit of an update on a couple of things going on. For those that aren't aware, there's just a little bit going on in Gungahlin at the moment, not just about roads, which dominates everyone's thinking, just to set you up, Ben, but also around the Gungahlin Country Club, the Gold Creek Country Club, the Gold Creek Homestead, progress on the Air Towers development, trying to get some update on what's happening with the community consultation around the new bus network related to light rail introduction, and then of course light rail and buses and everything else. So yes, just a bit on the hop at the moment. But we'll kick off now. Ben's a regular here, giving us an update on some of the infrastructure that's going on, and hopefully he can give us an update on some of the projects that are underway. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, ACT Roads is probably what it was called at some point in time. As we are in government, we tend to keep you on your toes, change the names every couple of years, just so you have to try a bit harder to find us. But it's interesting, you said I've been coming out to these meetings, I think for almost eight or 9 years now, and the first 4 or 5 years I remember talking about putting pretty pictures up of what roads might look like one day and what the town centre might look like, and hearing back, well, why don't you just get on and build it? And I kept on saying, yep, and we're trying, and we'll get there. And then I was thinking in the car on the way out here, remembering back on those days, I wonder, now I'm going to be out here apologising for the impact of delivering all the things that everyone's always wanted us to deliver all at the same time. So, I guess the introduction comes with a sense of, empathy for the impact of all of these works. But what I've learnt doing this sort of stuff around Canberra for the last 20 odd years is that people soon forget once things are finished, and the access to that improved infrastructure or that new bit of road, the benefits soon outweigh the pain during construction. So we'll start it off on that point, and I'll probably I'm happy to take questions on anything as we go, just to get up and we'll get to those. If we're getting questions through online, absolutely happy to try and answer some of those as well. But Peter was right, there's a lot going on, and it's not just in the road space, and government's committed some investment to the roads out here over the last few years, and the private sector's absolutely responded to that, and there's as much, if not more, private sector development happening around the town centre and all those paddocks that were vacant for a long time now than what you'll ever see. So it's a pretty exciting time. So I'm going to talk through, there's some handouts that are on the table. Feel free to take those whenever you like and digest the information in those. But as you can see around the town centre, there's not many roads that we aren't actually doing some work on at the moment. Some of that is associated with growth and providing increased capacity on those road networks. Other projects are associated with completing the town centre's road network so that future development can occur, and a lot of that's happening to the east of the town centre. So a number of the projects, and this presentation will be available, Peter, I assume, via yourself after this evening. So if you want to go through it in detail, and if you want to get in touch with us afterwards with some more questions, feel free. But because there's a lot of information on some of these slides now that I look at them. But I'll quickly run through this list of projects in more detail. So obviously Gundaroo Drive is the one that's been causing everyone a nightmare for a couple of years now. There's some work recently started on extending Ernest Kavanagh Street, so that's part of completing the Gungahlin East precinct. Obviously some work happening in the bus station. We opened the bus station for bus operations and we're finishing off some of the landscape work at the moment. Obviously light rail stage 1 speaks for itself. The Hibberson Street shared zone, for those who aren't familiar, we're in there at the moment converting Hibberson Street to a one-way shared zone, and I'll talk a bit more about that with a picture in detail. And then obviously the various stages of Horse Park Drive, which has been underway for some time, and I know there'll be some questions around the final stage, so we can have a chat about that. And then the last one is the new access road called Camilleri Way, which I'm not sure if people were aware of the name of the road, but that's the new road to the south of the Valley Ave that runs along the edge of the grasslands, and again that's another part of the Gungahlin East Estate. That will allow us to bring land to the market over the next 4 or 5 years for future development down towards the east.
One of the questions. Microphone.
Oh damn! I wanted to throw that.
One of the questions that we were asking the people at the Active Transport or whatever it was, Transport Canberra was, about a drop-off zone for the new bus stop.
Yep.
Is there a drop-off zone?
In terms of pick-up, set down?
Yeah, pick-up.
Yeah, so there's a couple of spaces that are yet to be opened up on the southern part of Gungahlin Place, which will be identified as pick-up, set down during certain periods, and then during other periods there'll be short-term parking. So that's to manage that peak flow. We're also, with the location, I might jump through to the bus station. I think we've got some pictures. Probably can't pick it up in those images. That's just a picture of the new shelters and talks about the bus station operations. But so in the town centre, we've got an existing park and ride which sits on that block. It's a gravel car park. It was designed and built a few years ago to service buses when they were parking at this end of Hibberson Street. When the construction work is complete, those park and ride car parks will be moved up to the Gungahlin Place end of that car park, so that they're within a short walking distance of the terminus, and they'll be there to support light rail as well. And we're looking in that car park to provide what we call a kiss and drop as well, so an area where people can circle through, people can wait and get picked up after their journey.
And are you going to make sure that people who ride on the buses and actually park there and no one else?
Yeah, so the way that park and ride works and the way that we design it to utilise the parking space is that it is dedicated for park and ride users for a period of the day. That's between I think 7:30 and 10:30 in the morning, so that people that come to get on the bus and catch the bus into work, the spaces are available. What we find is that the spaces after that period, often in park and ride car parks that are 24 hours a day, are unutilised. So we then open them up for other use after that.
So how do you enforce that?
Oh, so the same way that so to get a park and ride pass or a permit, you have to have an active My Way card, and there has to be demonstrated use of that My Way card over a period. And all you've got to do is apply, and you'll get a park and ride permit to put in your car, and you'll be able to park in those spaces. So that's all. All that information is available on the Transport Canberra website. Yep. All right. So we might go through this in a bit of order now. So I thought I'd get Gundaroo Drive Stage 1 out of the way. It's been the most. Yeah. I wish it was that easy. It's been the most challenging project that I've been involved with in Canberra from this perspective. It's running at the moment about 9.5 months behind schedule. 6 months of that is associated with getting approval to build the road over a high pressure gas main. So I'm not sure if people are aware, but running along the western side of the old Gundaroo Drive between Gungahlin Drive and Mirabai Drive is a 250mm high pressure gas main that services the whole Gungahlin region. That went in about 20 odd years ago, right down, smack bang down the middle of where we wanted to build the new carriageway. Usually we would move an asset like that out of the way so that it didn't sit under the road, but within that road reserve, given the proximity to the houses on one side and the businesses on the other, there wasn't enough space to do that safely because of the size of the asset. So we had to go in and dig inspection holes, I think about every 30 metres of this asset to check the condition So what happens to a gas main over time is that it can corrode. They actually line them in a grease, the whole pipe, so we had to go and check that the lining was still in place so that it was safe enough to build the road over. That took us, like I said, about 6 months longer than we expected. So we didn't actually really start building the roadworks, and you know, we started that project back in April 2016. We didn't start roadwork construction until late 2016. That put us on the back foot, and so it's been an absolute nightmare to try and build under traffic too. It's a very busy road, so you've got to accommodate traffic through all stages of construction, which means you can only build little bits and pieces at a time without closing the thing off completely. We couldn't close it completely. It's too critical in the network to have that bit of road closed. There were no other north-south connections. The Valley Avenue connection was never going to carry that offset traffic. So, you know, it's just been a nightmare. The good news tonight is that come the end of June, we plan to have all 4 lanes open on Gundaroo Drive in both directions, and the intersection down at Gungahlin Drive completed and open. So that's only a couple of months away from now. And then towards the start of September, we're planning on having all the Mirabai Drive widening works and the new set of traffic lights at Gundaroo and Mirabai Drive completed as well. So as much as it's been the thorn in our side, I know it's definitely been a significant impact out here. We are getting to the end of that project.
So Ben, with the, notwithstanding the gas main issue, what's been the other delays? Because observations within the community is that there is actually work happening. Like when you compare the rate of effort on Horse Park Drive to Gundaroo Drive, there's quite a contrast in workers that are on there, the rate of activity, and then the speed of delivery. So if you excuse that delay of that gas main, what's caused the rest of the delay?
Yeah.
When we're talking about what, not even a kilometre in length.
No, absolutely. So another change to the schedule, added 3 months to the schedule, was the additional scope of work. So originally we were only building up to the Mirabai Drive roundabout and connecting in at that point. But there was a change in scope in the 2016 election when Minister Fitzharris committed to signalising that and adding capacity across Mirabai Drive to get more morning peak traffic through that intersection and south. So that was about a $2.5 million increase in scope of work. That added another 3 months to the time frame. So we had to then go through a process, and then there's been other impacts like obviously wet weather over a 2-year period that starts to add up. We've had a pretty dry season this season, so you know it's.
Sorry, I don't think the weather impacts, but when you compare it to Horse Park Drive, like Horse Park Drive, you know, if you compare kilometre to kilometre, Horse Park Drive has, you know, well and truly outstripped what's happened at Gundaroo Drive.
Yeah.
So the wet weather doesn't play into it because it would impact on Horse Park Drive.
Well, the wet weather does play into it depending on where you are in the project and when it rains. So Horse Park Drive started a long time after Gundaroo Drive. And so when we had a wet winter in 2017 and they were in doing their earthworks, the progress was very slow, absolutely. And it appeared that way on site.
Why would you expand their scope when they haven't delivered the first part of the project? Why not deliver the first part of the project and then expand the scope?
It made sense that when we had a contractor on site, he was established, there were obviously cost benefits from not having to pay overheads for a second contractor and someone else to come in and establish site and then manage that interface. It was obviously a consideration, absolutely. We had to go through a process to ensure it was the right outcome, but that was the decision we made.
I understand the same contractor, but I suggest it's a... Do I just talk in this? Yeah. It seems to me, as a businessman and an engineer, this is a really poorly performing contractor. The site is a mess, it's unsafe, it's lagging on despite the concession. I understand, but I do agree with the gentleman before that it is unforgivable to expand the scope of a contract mid-contract and provide a perfect excuse for an excusable delay. So from a business perspective, it's just suicide. But can you confirm that the same underperforming contractor was given work out at the Cotter area in, you know, as you go out towards Denman Prospect? That's the same contractor doing the work that is underperforming here and is diverting resources to another underperforming program?
I can't confirm. I don't know the details of the work you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure it's the same one.
They do lots of work around town, Wogan
Yeah, but-
contractors. They've been operating in Canberra for 30 plus years.
Well, they should seriously consider resourcing this properly,
Yeah.
cleaning up the site. I'd suggest that any inspection by an impartial, independent workplace health and safety representative would destroy it.
Yeah, and we heard those concerns from the community only a month or two ago, and we actually asked WorkSafe, who are an independent body, to go out and inspect the site.
Did they give it a clean bill of health?
They had 3 improvement notices on that particular day. 2 of them were corrected at that point in time, and 1 had to be corrected at a later date. So that look, I hear your comments, and we had the same concerns, and we brought in WorkSafe, who are independent from any of the project delivery functions, and they inspected it.
Just adding on to that comment, as a bureaucrat in Canberra, not a politician, can you make any comment against what Minister Fitzharris has publicly made no apology about, that they're quite happy to restrict these public works to locally based contractors, and therefore no apology where there are delays because they're keeping the work within Canberra? But then when you look at the extent of public works, the poor performance in some of the contractors, as just discussed, how that impacts on ratepayers' money. Okay, so this is ratepayers, not politicians. This is our money being spent on extending these projects, rents for bollards, rents for fencing, rents for equipment that's just left sitting there, you know, with these extended delays. So you're the bureaucrat that's responsible for delivering us efficient services.
Absolutely.
So what's your comment?
Okay, so I can't comment on a government policy that's presented by the current government, but what I can comment on is the policies that have existed in our organisation around local industry participation, and they are requirements for companies who tender on our projects to demonstrate a level of local business activity. So, and that varies from the type of contractor or consultant they are and the type of project that they work on.
So do you have damages, for example, in the contract?
Absolutely,
when we're late?
there's liquidated damages in the contract, yeah.
Not damages, penalties.
There are penalties as well, yeah.
So this Gundroo Drive Stage 1 duplication, 3rd quarter 2018. Are we talking late 3rd quarter?
We're talking, at the moment, the completion date is in the 2nd week of September. So that's,
Second week of September.
so it's towards the middle of the 3rd quarter.
If that doesn't happen, is a penalty applied?
Unless he gets an approved extension of time, as you would know under his contract, then absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you approve it, then that goes away.
Well, there's certain things that are outside the contractor's control that are valid extensions of time under a contract. If you worked in contract management, you'd understand that. And at this point in time, the contractor has an extensive list of approved extensions of time for things like the Gemina work, the additional scope of work are all approved extensions to his contract completion date. But just to go back to your comment about local industry participation.
Yep.
So, you know, as I said, I've been involved in a lot of projects like this, and these projects are open tenders. They are open to anyone in the country to tender, as long as they've got an approved pre-qualification in the ACT. What we find is for interstate players to come to Canberra and establish a presence to deliver these types of works, the scale of the job needs to be pretty significant. And by significant, a plus $50 million project before a lot of them will come and invest in establishing a local office, unless they have the intention to be here for the long period. And so we've had companies come and do that and establish a presence. We've had companies come and go. So we had a company come into town and build the Majura Parkway. They then packed up and left. And so, you know, there's different ways that it works. But in terms of bringing other people into town to increase the competition, as a sort of might be your intent of the comment, the scale of the project really will determine what you get.
So I guess if the project's broken down into stages and then broken up, and each stage is tendered for, that keeps it down to a small work package and therefore not attractive for a big tender.
Potentially, yeah. But that's not the intention of the delivery model. I think that's more influenced by government's ability to fund all of these things all over town all at the same time. Okay. But again, I'm delivery. I don't make the Treasury policy questions. So. But all right, I appreciate that. Some more, yeah.
Yeah, microphone.
There you go. So, my question, I suppose, about this, a couple of our jobs to improve traffic at the moment would be to scrape up, there's a little concrete strip that sits in the middle of the old southbound carriageway.
Yep.
If you could scrape that up and let us into the right turn lane,
Yeah.
So I know it's going to happen as part of the project. I get it.
Absolutely.
To get it done and get traffic into that right turn lane will remove so much congestion while we're travelling through the work zone.
Yeah, so I came out and walked the site last Friday and asked the contractor and my project manager the exact same question.
Yep.
It's been retained to allow them to do work safely on the bridge. They
could put up some
approach.
concrete
That
barriers.
work's now finished, so they're in a position. They're going to look at when they can schedule.
They
that
could have
work.
put up concrete barriers to work behind, like they have elsewhere on the project. That's a cop out.
Oh no, I'm happy to go down there and show you what that actually means, because they were working directly within the lane adjacent to where the barrier was.
Yeah, understood.
But now they've finished that work now. They've finished that work.
And
now.
the other question I had, which just came up from one of your other answers,
Yeah.
is we've got pre-qualification for our road services, as do other states.
Yeah.
Would we be better off aligning our pre-qualification processes in with Vic Roads and RMS as being the two biggest roads corporations in the country, so that we get a broader range of companies that if they're pre-qualified for one state, they can work in one or two or three of the others to make it a more open playing field for everyone that wants to work in Canberra?
Yeah, a valid question, and something I'll take up with our procurement agency. I'm not sure that someone with pre-qualification with RMS isn't allowed to tender unless they've got pre-qualification here. But obviously, the things that go into pre-qualification around, the services for making sure you pay your subcontractors, making sure you're paying all your staff, all of those sorts of things that get tested and checked behind the scenes. I'm not sure whether governments would be willing to share that information, but it's a valid question.
That's it. It's a question. It's not hunting down anyone.
No.
If we can align it and get better efficiency through it, then we're all winners.
No, absolutely. Excellent.
What's the actual work being done on the eastern side? Sorry, the
on the
work
eastern
being
side.
done on the eastern side of the duplication?
Yeah, so if you think about that, just used to be 2 lanes of traffic and then curbs either side. That had to be widened to accommodate the southbound lanes and an on-road cycling lane, and then also a new shared path that runs along that side as well, and then some new landscaping works.
Okay, so that's all part of the road duplication
Absolutely.
out the other side?
Yeah. So when we took traffic off, it allowed us to run 2 lanes, and then our policy is to include on-road cycling lanes on these arterial roads to make sure we complete our on-road cycling network. To do that, we had to widen that carriageway.
Will you be replacing the off-road path that was there?
Absolutely, as well. That goes further up the hill and some new trees go in.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm not sure if people have had the chance, but online on our website there's a video that talks about stage 2, so I won't play that tonight, but if you do have time, it's a visualisation or a fly-through to show what will be delivered in stage 2. So we're out on stage 2 at the moment. So what we learnt from stage 1, so we do learn lessons sometimes, is that having a contractor on the hook and then having Gemina out there doing gas work put the project at risk. So we've engaged Gemina directly as the government to go out and move their asset on stage 2, which has allowed us to have a separate contract with the contractor to start work in available space on stage 2. So stage 2 works commenced out there a couple of months ago with moving the gas main. We're making good progress on that, and road works are about to begin.
Quick question on stage 2.
Yep.
That's right. Hello, Facebook. It's just going back to, so when you did the Barton Highway roundabout, I know this is winding back the clock.
Yep.
Why was the decision taken to stop the slight extension of the duplication of Gundaroo Drive to about 500 metres short of the Crace roundabout, whereas they were all on site? They could have just pushed it through to that roundabout then to save having to come back and...
Yeah, it was a financial decision. So that people might not be aware, but the Barton Highway roundabout upgrade was partially funded by the federal government.
Yeah, it's part black spot funding.
That's right. So it was a like-for-like funding arrangement, a national partnership agreement, and that was limited to a certain capped value, so we couldn't extend the scope of work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
No worries. So the piece of work that's happening in the background of that image is the extension of Ernest Kavanagh Street. So Ernest Kavanagh Street is the street that runs parallel to Hibberson, for those who aren't aware. It currently stops at Hinder Street, but in the plans it runs all the way through down to Manning Clark. So this piece of work has just started only a few weeks ago. It's pretty much through the middle of where the light rail construction compound has been. So we've had to work with light rail to free that space up to allow us to continue that work through. There'll be there'll be a new intersection at the intersection with Cape Grace Street, and that'll be left in, left out on either side, and then it'll continue through to Manning Clark. But
brings forward in the land release program a range of blocks that sit between Anthony Rolfe Avenue and Hibberson Street at that section. So it's due to be completed late in 2018. Horse Park Drive. So Horse Park Drive again is being delivered in segments, again to align with the funding opportunities that were available at the time. So obviously Well Station Drive through to Anthony Rolfe Avenue was completed to allow us to get access into Throsby, and we duplicated that section at that point in time, and then we've been working further to the west from there since then.
And the bottleneck at the other end at Well Station is getting longer and longer, because you used to have one lane to queue back for about 2k.
Yeah.
Now you've got two lanes that are queuing back for about 1.5k each, which is 3k of queuing.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this game, we're in queue management, and at the moment we're partially through managing the queues on Horse Park. I'll talk a bit more about what we've always called stage one. It was the bit we wanted to build first, from Well Station through to the Federal Highway.
It should have continued straight on after Majura.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for doing it the way we've done it.
Yeah, and look, I'll talk to you why it didn't progress as it did. So I think there might be a slide that talks about that in a second, but no, potentially not. So I'm not sure if people are familiar with acid sulfate soils or the impact of acid sulfate soils, but anyone who does drive through that Federal Highway interchange, you probably notice a really rusty orange water or staining on the infrastructure and on the concrete. That's the result of acid sulfate leaching out of the bedrock or the rock below the soil of the surface of the earth. When that's exposed, that becomes an environmental hazard, environmental risk. And you might also know a really odd-looking sort of bedding if you've come off the Federal Highway to turn left down into Horse Park Drive, just up on your right, there's a really weird shape, looks like a giant mattress. So that's one technique we use to suppress the leaching of acid sulfate soils out into the natural watercourse, because acid sulfate just kills everything and is a high environmental risk. So as part of the Majura Parkway works, we've done a lot of, we've invested quite heavily in managing the acid sulfate, but the acid sulfate is prevalent pretty much all the way from the Federal Highway through to Sullivan's Creek. Okay, so as soon as we start to scrape away and get ready for the roadworks, we're exposing all of this acid sulfate. So we couldn't get approval from the EPA to start that work that we'd designed and had ready to go some time ago until late in 2017, at which time we went to tender. So we've now got approval. So there was two options. One was we go in and dig as much of this stuff out, find a hole somewhere or an empty quarry, put it in there and cap it and manage it that way. That was going to cost us a significant amount of money, about $4.5 million just to move soil from one place to another. We didn't think that was the best use of your money. We thought the best use was to come up with a way that the EPA would approve us keeping the material on site, capping it and managing it. And it took us an extended period to demonstrate to the EPA that we could do that. Some of the techniques used will be similar to that mattress bedding. Others are a layer of material that prevents the seepage. So when we get down to the sulfate, we put a layer of this, it's almost like a thick plastic down to keep the acid sulfate down, and then we build our roads on top of that. It's like a membrane, exactly. So, and that was going to save us a significant amount of money that we could retain in the project and make sure that we could deliver, the key elements for the community. And one of those was a shared path and a continuation of the shared path from the Majura Parkway. So we were at a point mid last year when we were thinking, right, we can't get approval. We're going to have to just take this material away and dump it. And we had to look at the project budget and see what we were going to drop. And the shared path was on the list. But we knew that was significant to the community, particularly linking to the path we built on the Majura Parkway. So we persisted with the EPA and got them to agree to that outcome. So the good news is there's only one bridge structure in that stage, so that's over the creek, and the rest of it is reasonably straightforward earthworks. So it has a shorter time period in terms of the construction program than some of the other segments. So
gas mains?
No big gas mains out there. Gas main wasn't a surprise. We knew it was there. We just didn't know what condition it was in. But there's no significant services out here that are going to get in the way.
What rehabilitation works are you going to be including on the old carriageway?
Yeah, so we're going to resurface the old carriageway. So the bit from Well Station Drive through to Anthony Rolfe that wasn't given a nice smooth asphalt finish with the Throsby work.
We know.
We're going to pick that up as part of this project.
Excellent. So you're going to resurface
Absolutely.
that bit as well.
Yeah.
in former tender documents for other sections, it actually noted that the original carriageway was actually built as a temporary road.
Right.
It was never, this is going back to one of the older projects you've done.
Yep.
So you've sort of got a road that's been built for the 100-year standard on the new stuff,
Yep.
and this temporary road which actually probably needs to be reconstructed at some point.
The resurfacing will be based, the decision on that will be based on the condition of the road at the time. Generally, roads are built for about a 25-year lifespan before you have to start to do more preventative maintenance or some rehabilitation work.
Yep.
So we'll make sure that whatever the surface goes down will get us that life.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other part of Horsepark Drive, which has been added to the scope, is out at the western end. So for people who are familiar with it, the work is continuing through to Mulligan's Flat, and the section between Anthony Rolfe and Gundaroo Drive finished quite quickly, and the section from Gundaroo through to Mulligan's Flat is making really good progress as well. So we plan to switch some traffic onto the new carriageway towards the end of this month. We're just waiting on the finalisation, of the barriers around the bridges. And then we'll be able to switch traffic onto that carriageway, tidy up the existing carriageway, get that completed, and then open that section as well. And then the final stage from Mulligan's Flat out past Catherine Avenue, out past Amaroo School, was another additional piece of scope that we were able to bring in once we resolved the Well Station to Federal Highway component. We always wanted to do that, but with this acid sulphate thing hanging over the project, we didn't want to commit to it in case we needed the funding. Solve that problem means we can press the button on that extension. Some of the real benefits in doing that part out past Catherine Avenue West will be improving the pedestrian access across Horsepark Drive, particularly around the school where there's a lot of school kids and it's quite busy during the school period, and absolutely improving the capacity through the intersection, so we get twice as many lanes through that intersection. So any further questions on Horsepark?
There's a couple of general ones online.
We can get to those. Yep. Okay. So that's just one of the bridges near Ford. That was taken a couple of weeks ago. We've now actually got asphalt up to and across that bridge. The next project is the road to the south of Valley Avenue. Has been called for some time. It's actually been named Canberra Way, and it actually sits down here on this picture. So that was when Valley Ave was being constructed. It was the only picture I could find on a mapping service provider before the meeting. But the edge of the new road sits down here. There's also a new connection through to Cape Grey Street, and that intersection at Cape Grey Street gets signalised. That work is planned to begin in about June. They also connected through into Gungahlin Place and built their new set of traffic signals just out at Gungahlin Place, and Valley Avenue as part of that works as well. They're making pretty good progress. I think they plan to open that section in about the end of the third quarter this financial year. Again, so that will open up development parcels down through the Gungahlin East precinct.
Get a question on that one?
Yep, absolutely.
I'll toss. Catch.
Good hands.
It seems unwise that Camilleri Way is just going to stop at a right-hand bend and then have to feed into Valley Avenue and Gungahlin Place at a set of traffic lights. Why doesn't it keep going through and substitute for the Valley Way by joining down near Bergman School?
Yep. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One is in the original Gungahlin plan, there's a green spine that is Gungahlin Place that runs right through the town centre, and that was on an alignment with a corridor, a heritage corridor that ran through that area, and the road network was never planned to cross that corridor. There's a shared path continuation, which follows, I think, the old Well Station track alignment. And the other part of it is that edge road is really only to service the development that sits along it. It's not designed to be a bypass of the town centre. That's the function that Valley Avenue should play, and it should carry the bulk of traffic. So those edge roads really are to provide service and access to those blocks. On the western side of Gungahlin Place is a residential street. There are driveways and houses along there that road services. So in the road network hierarchy, which is the different levels of streets in our system, those are what we would call local streets or edge streets, and they're not designed to carry high volumes of through traffic.
Well, the basic problem is that Flemington Road's going to be a nice fine 4-lane road that comes up and then just hits intersections and suburban roads, instead of having
something to actually carry transit traffic through to
So the
Gungahlin Drive. It's just, I cannot believe that the strategic traffic plan was so
the intent
tragic.
The intent of Anthony Rolfe Avenue and the Valley Avenue is to play that role as a bypass for the town centre. I'm assuming when that plan was put together, they didn't anticipate that a significant number of blocks on Hibberson Street would be closed to all traffic. But the role of Valley Avenue and Anthony Rolfe Avenue will only increase as providing that bypass for the town centre.
Except that the Valley Avenue ends at a T intersection, and so there's a dog leg to be performed to get onto Flemington Road as it is. I mean, if that had been tapered across when it was all empty paddocks, then I could see the alternate plan, the recovering from a poor initial plan, but it's just been made even the same incongruous lack of throughput has been maintained in the planning. I'm staggered, frankly.
Yep, I haven't got a further response. All right, if there's no more questions on that one. Oops, that wasn't the right button. So this is a picture taken fairly recently of some of the earthworks out in Taylor. Taylor's a new suburb being developed right up the far north of Gungahlin. A couple of new roads and intersections have been constructed to get access into Taylor. There's a school being developed and some playing fields being developed in this area at the moment as well. So that was just another project that had been recently completed. The Hibberson Street shared zone, I'm not sure if people have had the chance to see some of the detail on that, but we went to the community, I think in 2016, with a few different options for what we could do with Hibberson Street after some of these other significant changes that happened around the town centre, primarily a new light rail terminus, a new bus station, and there was definitely a cry out from the community to make Hibberson Street a place more for people rather than for traffic. There's a range of ways you can do that. One is you can close it to traffic and just make it a pedestrianised mall, and other options are to provide shared zone where people and pedestrians and cyclists get priority over vehicles, becomes more attractive from that perspective for pedestrians, deters a lot of through traffic or traffic that doesn't need to be there, but provides an opportunity outside of those busy periods for there to be activation in the space. What we find with pedestrianised areas or malls is that after hours they are not as well utilised. People don't feel as safe in there. There's not as much activation. There's not people around. So the shared zone is halfway between the two. Provides people with the opportunity at 9 o'clock to duck in and grab a coffee or whatever it is on your way home, or duck in for dinner. But during the busy periods, you know, there's no real need for people to be driving through there. So so that's under construction at the moment and is planned for completion at the end of August at this point in time, and that'll be quite an exciting upgrade for Hibberson Street, and it'll provide a higher quality public realm, lots more space in the outdoors for people to sit and eat and dwell and enjoy the place. So, and I think Gungahlin, even though Gungahlin Place has been there for a while, has never really had that active, people-friendly place where people are attracted to go and spend some time. So we're excited about that one. Yep. Oh, good hands.
Alrighty.
Straight from training.
Just on the Hibberson Street shared zone, for the last, I think, 6 weeks, the fencing's been put up.
Yep.
And it's that fencing where you can't, you can't see across.
Yeah, okay.
I've been having a little bit of trouble hearing you tonight because my ears are ringing from all the construction works. I'm a business owner on Hibberson Street there, and I actually held a decibel reader out the front of my door, over 100 decibels.
Really?
You know what that's the equivalent of? A jet taking off, or a jackhammer. I then closed my door and it was still 91 decibels. Anything over 85 is extremely detrimental to your hearing. I'm sitting in there 9 hours a day. Is there restrictions on, the amount of noise?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. And is there any, I don't know, this might have been covered at previous meetings, but is there any sort of compensation that these small business owners are eligible for? Because I'm telling you now, this is hurting us big time. Yep. I've been one of the more lucky ones. I've only had this fencing go up over the last 4 to 6 weeks. And and it's not pleasant. It's not good for foot traffic. I'm struggling to, keep my business afloat, and I know that there's a hell of a lot of other business owners in the area that are, selling investment properties, asking for money from other, family members and stuff like that.
Yep.
So, is there any compensation?
There's always an opportunity for any business to approach government and seek compensation, okay? But there's a process to do that. It's managed centrally through the government solicitor's office, and they'll ask you obviously to demonstrate that outcome. So absolutely, there's not a bucket of money parked over here for that purpose. It's a case-by-case basis. And
did I hear that the ACT government spent $2 million in putting like little taps on all the bus stops and light rail stops for dogs to drink out of? So there must be a bucket of money there somewhere if we're going to be spending it on stupid stuff like that.
I wasn't aware of that myself,
okay.
But it sounds like an interesting use of public funds. But like I said, there's an opportunity for you to approach government and seek compensation, but there'll be a process that you'll have to go through. So yeah, absolutely. But the projects don't come with here's a contingency, here's a compensation bucket, that's just not how the projects work. In terms of your comments on the noise, absolutely. So contractors are required to comply with EPA noise guidelines for construction works, and that changes depending on the time of day. So if you've got absolute concerns, the EPA are the people to call. They'll come out, they'll take a reading like you did, and if it breaches those guidelines, they'll go to the contractor and get him to address that. One of the ways that they might address that is put a more significant fence between your business and their work, because unfortunately some of the work they do does generate noise. They tend to try and do that at the time and at least impacts people, but that might not be aligning with your business. So absolutely come and see me afterwards, and we'll get someone to come out, project manager to come and see you, and see if there's anything we can do on site. If there's a way we can time works to avoid conflict with your working hours as well. Obviously there are some residents around the town centre as well who we have to be considerate of. In other parts it's best to do noisy work at night because there's no one lives there, but in the town centre unfortunately we've got this mix of, which is what we're trying to achieve, people living there and enjoying the space, but also that happens at night all hours of the day, and then the people that work there. So it's a challenge, but yeah, happy to talk to you and work through it. In terms of yeah, absolutely. Yep. So every resident and every business in the area on a number of occasions has been given the contact details of the contractor and the government to contact. So very good hands.
Just a quick one for myself.
Yep.
I think that everybody that's been here for years and years and years is quite happy with what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
However, there's a significant problem with quick parking in the area. And at night, Woolies closes its car park. Okay. Is there any discussion with whoever the car park owners are to keep that blasted thing open?
Absolutely, and I thought I saw one of them here earlier, and he may have ducked out. But yeah, look, if you want to bring that to our attention, we can follow that up on your behalf and have a chat to them.
I think it's absolutely essential. Yeah. If you want to stop in for a cup of coffee and there's no parking, you're going to bypass it, and that'll affect the business people along there pretty poorly, I would imagine.
It's a good point.
Wilson's?
Wilson's manage it on behalf of the owner. Yeah, so that would be the manager. But if you wanted to get a decision to change the timing and use, that would be with the building owners and operators. Yeah. Okay. The Gungahlin bus station. So it's partially open at the moment and operating. You would have noticed a pretty significant bus shelter structure along the eastern side of Gungahlin Place. That serves a couple of purposes. Buses are noisy, operating buses are noisy, especially the older diesel buses. As we replace that fleet with more up-to-date buses or electric buses, the noise levels definitely do change. But we have people who live above where that bus station was planned to be delivered. So the solution to manage noise and suppress noise was to build an extensive structure along that verge. It doubles as an outdoor structure for some of the venues who have already asked for approval to use some of the space for dining, but also for the patrons out there waiting for the buses. But you might notice the underside of the shelters is a perforated product, and underneath that is a sound baffle, and that's to absorb as much noise as possible and keep those bus stations as quiet as possible. obviously we needed to get the bus station as close as possible to the light rail terminus, so people transferring between the two at the shortest distance as possible to complete. The remaining landscaping works in the median around the bus station are due for completion in the next week and a half, 2 weeks, and then all of those site fences will come down, that space will be opened back up again. So they had a significant bit of work, and they got through that in the first few months of this year, so that was a better achievement. And I think that's all I had to talk about tonight by the looks of it. So are there any questions about other projects I haven't covered? Or
so I'll just jump in and go through some of the comments online.
Yeah.
There were a lot that were echoing things that were said in the room here, calls for compensation for businesses affected by light rail. Yes, the dogs did get water taps. But one of the themes that kept coming up was actually about the deliverable dates.
Yep.
And essentially calls for more transparency on them.
Sure.
Quarters aren't specific enough.
Yeah.
Can we get more specific answers, more specific estimates, more specific and more reliable? And I understand that by giving more specific, they tend to become less reliable. But that's what they're asking
you've
for
absolutely nailed it. You probably will have noticed we've moved recently to reporting on quarters, and that is not just by choice. That is a response to us providing more transparency on the exact contractual completion dates. And we say May, and then we have 3 weeks worth of rain or another delay, another approved delay, and it's June, and we've got a lot of material around, or we've got a whole lot of things around, and you know that transparency is good, but we're often then out updating everything and having to come out here and talk to you every month about why we've moved 4 weeks down the track. So quarters, we feel, gives us enough flexibility in terms of contingency within a project that's going to be impacted. I haven't been involved in a project that's finished on its original completion date. That's the way contracts work in this space. They are subject to influences outside their control a lot of the times, and the elements is one of those. So we've deliberately moved to quarters so that we can give more level of confidence on that completion date to the community, but also balance that risk of being too specific with the time frame.
No worries. Is there the opportunity to make more publicly available project milestones?
So project contracts, once they're signed, are available online. They're public documents, and you can go and have a look at those contracts through procurement. Obviously, there's some information in there that's confidential, like price and other things that are commercial in confidence, but contract dates are published on the procurement website.
Will Nadir Drive ever be completed?
Yes. When? I couldn't tell you right now.
We've been looking. That there's asbestos in containers underneath that?
Yeah, absolutely. So people who are aware of Nadir Drive, it was identified. There was a waste sort of space, or a building waste space that was used to store some asbestos in the first round of the clean-up process many years ago. Maybe, I don't know the exact date, 15 odd years ago now. Some of those storage containers sit below where the new road alignment will be, but we have checked and we can keep them in there and we can build the road over it. It's just about the timing of when that connection provides the benefit compared to other roads around the region. And obviously, when you see what's happening out there at the moment, there was a long list of needs out here, and it at the moment sat below the current delivery program.
Okay, and one other question, is there any plan to move some of those boulders in Gungahlin Place Park that are directly in your path as you walk through there, the bushes and what have you?
That's a fantastic question, which I've investigated personally in the last few months. We're working with the artist who designed that artwork to see if we can find a more suitable location for those artworks, those boulders. The other benefit that we will get shortly is the crossing just to the north of that at the end of Hibberson Street will become signalised, okay, as part of the bus station, and that'll provide a safe crossing point for pedestrians in a very, very close proximity, and maybe a reduced, I guess, level of pedestrian activity near those boulders. But I'm looking into it at the moment and talking to the artist.
Microphone, I win. But I'll come to you. So Ben, just to follow up on the question on Nadir Drive, there's a whole bunch of roads in Gungahlin which clearly have been laid as single lane roads each way, but in a space that's allowed for duplication. And you know, the ones I've picked out, the remainder of Horse Park Drive, Clary Hermes Drive, the extension of Gundaroo Drive, the rest of Mirabai Drive, and Nurdur are all examples of that. If some level of planning doesn't happen now to start building those, there's going to be a delay of a couple of years before we even start, another year to get designs done, and we could still be trying to build roads in Gungahlin in a decade, it seems. So clearly some planners thought these roads need to be double lane roads because they've allowed for that. You know, I hope all of the suffering we've suffered out in Gungahlin has ended up being reflected in Molonglo, where they seem to be building the major roads as dual carriageways. So there are some winners here. Just at the moment, they're not anyone who's living in Gungahlin. So I kind of don't know how to to carry this forward without it being why is it such a frustration? You know, gas lines laid on road verges, and you know, it's just really.
So I guess what we have learnt is that in those road reserves, any future utility or asset other than ours that goes in there now goes through a much more heavily scrutinised design review process. Obviously, we're learning everywhere we go. We're finding all sorts of things that were built 30, 40, and in some cases in other parts of Canberra, older parts of Canberra, 50, 60 years ago, that we're now having to get out of the way. In terms of how we plan our forward program, I guess is the real question. There's quite a detailed strategic modelling process that happens in the ACT. There's a transport planning section that sits within Transport Canberra. They manage the strategic model. That model gets updated annually based on population growth, traffic volume. So every year we go out and collect data on all of our roads, and all of that gets forecasted based on land release programs that are available at the time, you know, and growth model data, and all these other things get fed into this strategic model, and it identifies when a road is likely to be at capacity. We then start our planning about 5 years before that. Okay, so a road gets put on the strategic model, says, yep, you're going to go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes there at 2026. So we need to start planning for constructing and building that road at least 5 years before. And we have a forward program of work. And back in the office, you know, I've got a spreadsheet this long with all of those roads in it across Canberra. And each year we put forward bids to government and to Treasury to start that planning process, start the design process. And I was out here presenting those designs for some of these roads 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. But what really is the crunch is about the availability of funding to cover the investment in this type of infrastructure all across Canberra. And obviously, if we had enough money at the point in time when the suburb was established, we would build all of it. But then we're left with an underutilised asset that we have to maintain. We'd be resealing 3 or 4 times the amount of roads more often because they're underutilised. The stormwater systems are underutilised. So there is some science behind it. It'd be fair to say you always want to target your delivery of infrastructure just in time, so then it is fully utilised from the day it's available. Unfortunately, often the funding and the just in time don't always align. Sometimes you know, it's better to invest early and get it down and just wear those maintenance costs for a period. And in Molonglo, John Norton Drive, that decision was made. I was heavily criticised for gold plating the roads in Molonglo as soon as we opened that dual carriageway, don't you worry. It was a highway in the middle of a paddock. I had to convince people that as soon as you start to develop around this thing, this road will disappear into the landscape and you will appreciate having it. So, you know, it's a balance, it's a town planning question, but from an infrastructure delivery perspective, that's sort of how we try to align.
Yeah, it just hasn't worked out great.
No, look, absolutely. There's many examples out here where we would have loved to have been earlier.
We finished with the ritual beating of Ben. No, carry on.
To be honest, this has been more pleasant than I expected. So
come on,
all right. Okay,
it's not a look. It's not a beating, but there obviously is an increased trend with signalisation around Gungahlin now, like roundabouts going, signals going in. But you then see, I guess, some increase in congestion because, for example, along just outside McDonald's,
just out here,
KFC, just down here, we've got 3 sets of signals within about 200 metres.
Yep.
and somehow Woolies got approval to put 2 entrances and exits on either side of the intersection.
Yeah.
So even when the lights are operating,
Still people
you get
entering.
traffic in and out, and then you get gridlock at the intersection,
Yeah.
and then the lights change, etc. So in fact, on some occasions, those traffic lights have made the situation worse.
Absolutely.
It takes 20 to 30 minutes to actually get out of that car park. So
Is this,
that's not exaggerating now. 20 to 30 minutes literally.
is there any authority? I know you don't approve. It's an LDA issue to approve that design of that construction.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any
Yes,
ability
yeah.
to like close off
One of
an
those
entrance
access
like they did when the bus intersection was there, or
What-
just to increase
Yeah.
flow?
What we'll do is we'll have a look at the way the signals are timed and phased, because sometimes you can get improvements in flow and movement at particular times of the day. So there might be more people exiting that car park at 5:30 in the afternoon. So can we change the phasing to support that movement? And that's stuff we just learn as the thing starts to operate. So the signals, although they don't appear to be all the time, they're quite smart technology in that it collects all the data and all the traffic movement live, and will make slight adjustments to its phasing to provide more time to where there is an extended queue and those sorts of things. But in terms of more signalisation, it's the last resort for us from a traffic management perspective. We'd prefer to have unsignalised intersections or roundabouts because they provide far better efficiency through more of the day. But the network just gets to a point where it becomes unsafe, particularly in town centres when they're developing like they are. Like, I came out here a bit early this afternoon just to have a look at some of the projects, and the place is just buzzing. And when you've got pedestrians trying to cross those roads safely, you've got traffic volumes increasing on all approaches. Unfortunately, the last resort is to signalise, and ultimately, the more the signals are spread apart, the better you can coordinate them. The closer they are, the harder coordination becomes as well to get that sequencing, because the movement of vehicles is less predictable. Often it's stop-start or slow and crawl, and to get the timing right is difficult. When you've got longer distances, your known travel times for vehicles are better. So it's a good point, and yeah, look, it's not our first choice, absolutely.
I've got mine are like a bunch of small little questions related to the individual sets of traffic lights and intersections around.
Do you want to send them to me so that I can get your detailed response on it?
I'm not going to get biggest one that's nearly killed us and was me and my wife. Can you put up giveaway signs on each side of the road approaching the intersection that's been reprioritised?
Because
one was behind a tree, and I know that's been moved.
No,
but both sides of the road, because it's such a shit.
Signs are on order. Yeah.
And even bigger ones, like I know you've got different sizes.
Yeah.
They're not visible, and it's such a major change.
Yeah. No, we did a safety inspection there last week, and we've wanted some more signs and some other stuff.
Thank you. And I'll take the other ones with you offline.
If that's okay, and then I can give you a detailed response.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Everyone's time.
Thank you.
Yes, no worries.
All right, thank you very much, Ben.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
So we just had 3 topics I wanted to cover. Last week we had a segment on the Gold Creek homestead, and I just wanted to make sure that we capture what's going on there. About a month or so ago, the Suburban Land Agency, which is one of the 2 halves of LDA being split up, issued a tender for the sale of the quite large block of land to the east of the Grove in Ngunnawal, the retirement village there. This is a slightly elevated block of land, and it contains the old Gold Creek homestead, which was built in 1883, and it's one of the original homesteads on the Gungahlin region. Chris here, in fact, was commissioned by the ACT government to write a book on it. He's generous enough to give me a digital copy of it, and it's a terrific read around the hardships and challenges the families out here had in the early days. But the site itself, the building is somewhat surprisingly not as derelict as I expected it to be. Some of you who are really old like me might have gone out there for a wedding or a function sometime in the 70s or even 80s. And I remember going out there for a company Christmas event many years ago. But the homestead itself is in actually okay condition, and your roof is but then they go on to say, whatever you say is not going to be used in how we assess your tender. So they could say we could bulldoze it, or they could say we're going to restore it as a community facility or a meeting room, and somehow that won't in fact impact the tender. So we're very concerned about that. We've been communicating a lot with the media. You will have seen a lot of stories in the Riot Act and the ABC News, Canberra Times, to make people aware of that. We've not had anyone say, no, I think it's a piece of rubbish and should be bulldozed. So at the moment, our view is that the community is strongly in support of retaining the site in some form for public use. We've been in touch with the CEO of the Suburban Land Agency and suggested to him the lovely corporate speech he gave at a recent planning development forum about how the SLA was here for the Canberra people and their future and their history and everything. Really isn't consistent with how they've gone to market for the sale of this site, and he's acknowledged that point and is working on a response. In the meantime, of course, there are tenderers presumably preparing tender bids and submitting them, and I think they close in June or July, so it's not very far away before that happens. I am aware that the Land Lease organisation who own the retirement village are interested in the site. It's zoned for residential use, for community use, but is primarily intended for an aged care facility, which of course is different from a retirement village. And that could work quite well, retaining the homestead site and all the gardens as well. So that's really all I wanted to tell you and provide you an update on. But if there are any specific questions, I have a stab at answering them. But Chris, of course, who's done a lot of research on it, will be able to answer more. Can I send this microphone away now? Yep. Go the lob. Trust me.
Yeah, look, I think that's a very good point, and you raise a number of serious issues, and not wanting to be a bit of a pessimist, but we've community council has put up and done studies and had LDA consider them with respect to building heights, etc., around the town centre, which are completely ignored. They don't care.
I'll get to that. That's my third item. Second
That's
item.
right. So I guess you don't have confidence that they're going to take this on board for the homestead. So what would you propose, some sort of community action?
Well, we're attempting to be that community action. So the only course of action I can see, apart from working with the SLA to try and impose some retrospective rules on the tender, is to make it so obvious to the tenderers that there is a strong community view and that they really need to consider retaining the site in some form. I'm sure there will be a range of views on what you could do. I'd like to see the actual building retained in some form. I think there's some bits of it are actually pretty ugly. There's some brick bits added in the 60s that I don't think are that nice, but that's me. Whereas I think the old stone parts are actually pretty interesting and definitely worth retaining. But the gardens are really nice.
That's
Even
right, the open space in the garden.
the space is really nice. So that's, yeah, I mean, if anyone's got any, clever ideas, or B, time and motivation to be a serious campaigner as opposed to a part-time campaigner inside being a part-time member of the GCC, then I'd welcome them with open arms. Yeah, please. Thanks, Glenn.
Yeah, look, my name's Chris Newman. I wrote, I'm given the grant back in 2002 to write a history of Gold Creek. And it took a fair while to do. There was quite a there was a lot of community action that was motivated back then. We did actually have 2 open days at Gold Creek. We had one in 2001 and 2002. We had 1,500 people from the local area come through the homestead. We also had the local politicians involved, so there was a lot of profile to the homestead. But I think what's happened in the meantime is that it's fallen off the twig a bit. There have been 2 attempts to have the homestead listed on the local heritage register, and both have failed. But I think it's just a shame that that really the local history just in this case happens to be a very inconvenient fact in a suburb here, and it'd be terrible to see it go, given that it is essentially it pre-existed before the Gungahlin, and essentially Gold Creek has lent its name not only to a village, but also real estate agents. And in fact, Gold Creek has a lot of association with the local area, but that was the first Gold Creek in the area.
Yeah, and a number of the Rolfe family were perhaps the dynasty that established and maintained that property, and they've had a long connection with a number of other community groups in the region as well. So, yeah, that's kind of our plan. The National Trust, who are not the same as the Heritage Council, have written a pretty bluntly and direct letter to, again, the CEO of the Suburban Land Agency and to the MLAs, flagging they think the decision of the ACT Heritage Council wasn't accurate, or is inconsistent with other decisions where they excluded a bunch of local considerations. And I think we have that letter online on our website, so you're welcome to look at that. So there's an active campaign going on. I'll be talking about it tomorrow morning on the radio again. So trying to raise the awareness. If you've got a view, I'd encourage you to ping your MLAs. We have 5, of course, here, so plenty to choose from. So I'd encourage you to do that.
So the local heritage minister, I'm not sure which of the ministers is involved in heritage. It used to be the chief minister back in 2000.
Pass. Any volunteers for minister responsible for heritage issues? Mick Gentleman?
He's a nice guy. But maybe I'd be interested to see if he had any view on this.
Well, we should definitely make him aware of our position, and yes, I will take that as an action. So. All right, anything else on Gold Creek? Nothing online?
I'm happy for the PDF which I gave to you. If you want to make it available for a short time, if people want to download it,
sure.
Just to have a look at
I'll whack it on the website and leave it there until you tell me to take it off.
Well,
so,
I'll remind
cool.
you.
We can do that? All right, so the second topic I wanted to touch on was the Air Towers development. Do people need to see a picture of it to remind them what I'm talking about? Who's done? So you might remember there was a proposal for another residential tower complex at the corner of Gozard Street and Gundaroo Drive. It's kind of where that area comes to a point. So it's surrounded on 3 sides almost with residential and or a 1-storey business, the YMCA Childcare Centre. The original proposal was 2 towers at 26 stories, and it was a competition to name the site, which was accompanied with a user survey, which unsurprisingly was very supportive of the project, given that there was a cash prize for the name. When the proponents, an organisation called Empire Global, actually lodged their DA, it was for 1 large tower of 18 stories, tapering down to 12 stories at Gozard Street, wrapping around another building, a tower of 8 stories in the middle section. When the DA was lodged, there was a pretty strong campaign mounted by the GCC based on the feedback we'd had from residents that enough was enough, and then that particular location, buildings of that height are particularly noticeable because they immediately abut all the residential areas, as opposed to Infinity Towers, for example, which is, substantially back away from the other residences. And most of the other tower developments in there, and you should be aware that there are 9 towers proposed for that little precinct, kind of step down a bit as they approach the residential areas. So we were pretty strongly against the campaign, and a number of the businesses campaigned strongly against it. Nothing much has happened. We contacted Environmental Planning and Sustainable Development, and they said, yes, we still haven't made a decision on the site, on the DA. However, we have spoken to the proponents and suggested to them that the scale of the development was too big, and they have amended their proposal. And I went, so you're going to make that new proposal will then be made available for public notification? And the answer was no, we're not doing that. And it turns out there's a piece of legislation that says the government doesn't need to re-notify or take to public notification of development unless they think they're going to get substantively different feedback. And in their view, the development was being taken down from a maximum of 18 stories to a maximum of 15 stories, and therefore they would expect that the feedback would be the same. Now, I've suggested to them that I think it's more complicated than that because their top story building was 18 going to 12. If they go to 15, does that mean they still step down to 12 or are they stepping down to something else? Because all these things matter. But in any case, at least the 15-storey building is still up against the one-storey building. So we've made our concerns known about the transparency of that process. It took us to actively inquire about the DA to find out that a new version of the DA had been lodged, let alone the fact that it hasn't gone to public notification. We have made that known. We've published an article on our website, so you are all aware of what's happening. The current position is that they don't know when a decision will be made on the development. And I think that's everything that was in the website article. So I'm happy to take any questions on where that's at. We're still waiting to hear about the process, but we certainly have flagged it pretty actively with EPSDD, and we know they are well aware we're interested in the outcome. Yeah. A name of
target in the development agency.
I would encourage you to target the MLAs, to be honest. My experience with engaging with the bureaucrats is they execute a process, and they are executing a process. So they've done nothing, absolutely nothing wrong. They are completely within their legislative rights to not take something back to public notification. That would be my first port of call, would be go back to the MLAs and hold them accountable for decisions that are made in the region. So I've made a conscious effort not to publish the names of individual bureaucrats because I just don't think it's reasonable or fair that they have to defend a position that generally will be dealt with the Director General or the political layer.
There's always an ability to... The legislation is the bottom line. It doesn't say, no, you must not release this. We don't have to if we don't consider we need to.
That's good. That's
right. So that they do have a degree of discretion. So you can put pressure on the MLAs, but the whole idea would be to allow a certain amount of pressure so they can exercise that discretion because there's enough public interest to do so.
Yep.
So I can go through the process and try and drill down to the appropriate bureaucrats, but you've already done that work.
So let's be clear. There were 118 representations, okay, on this DA. So that's the previous DA on the pod projects towers, which are the two towers being built behind Lumi. There were 3, right? So I think EPSDD know that there's a level of interest. They know that there's a lot of intense scrutiny on this decision. So. I still think that the right course of action is to go through them. I have asked them, I've said to them, look, it's not okay for you to quietly tell us this over the phone. I need to, if you tell me stuff that's not interesting and useful, and I'm just a mouthpiece for the community, you tell me stuff I have to tell the community. So they've been engaged and had a chance to edit what we posted. So we're trying to be nice, but we're also trying to keep, making sure the transparency is high.
I mean, there is a degree of apathy in getting the local community and the direct local community activated to realise what's happening on their doorstep. And then so that has happened, which is a bit unfortunate because we probably should have been more active on the previous
There's a longer issue of why don't people pay more attention. When some people go, my goodness, where did that 20-storey tower come from? It's a bit late. But there's a general problem of how do you make sure everyone in the community is aware of everything all the time. And a number of people have said, well, no one told me. And it's like, well, sometimes you just have to keep your eyes and ears open. But there is, if you'd like to know, a review of the DA process going on right now under Have Your Say. So if you want to have your say, that would be another vehicle by which you could express an opinion. And I would encourage you to do that. Okay. Buses. As you know, we wrote to the Minister for Transport August 2017. We got a response early in 2018, essentially around lack of access to buses in new suburbs in Gungahlin, but also concerns around the quality of bus service in general and then also seeking some clarity around how things are going to change with light rail. And I think there's a lot of concerns that, you know, a lot of buses will vanish and we'll get a diminished public transport service, not a better one. We have been told since about November of last year that there was a consultation process going on to design the next version of the network that would support light rail. And we've had someone from Transport Canberra indicate to us that they would come out to our next meeting in November and then cancel. And then they would come in December and then cancel. And then in February and then cancel. I could keep going on, but I contacted them again 10 days ago and said, this is ridiculous, what is going on? And we had a briefing with Transport Canberra on Monday morning with their new new director, who's been there 3 weeks. They've told us they've completed stage 1 of their consultation, which surprised me because all I could remember was some questions about rapid bus services, and that in fact was, it turned out, stage 1. And so in the link for the agenda on the website, there's a pointer to that summary. If you can put up with me going to the laptop, I can put it up on the screen. Yeah. Okay. I can't talk because there's no microphone. No pressure. No one wants you back. Any questions? Any questions from the?
Oh, from my mind, sorry. No. Some good commentary, but.
What's the plan for occasional users of light rail? If regular users can use the My Way card and get some sort of free parking or cheap parking, what happens when you just say, oh, crikey, I need to get into Skyfire or something like that and use the light rail? What do you do?
In my experience, it'd be like a bus. Yeah, I've recently discovered the bus service, but I took there was a transition period before I got not a My Way card. I've got a Sydney one and a Melbourne one. They were confusing. And yeah, you just get on the bus and go, how much, and the guy charges you, and it's all good. But that's so painful, and the whole cash thing is just such a pain in the neck. You get a card. It takes about 5.
Specifically for something like Skyfire or Victoria, I wouldn't be surprised if they're free.
Yeah, I was thinking more just the occasional user,
They haven't said publicly whether or not there's going to be conductors selling tickets on board or not. They said it's going to be one ticket, one fare, which means will be compatible with the Highway, but they haven't said they haven't publicised what the alternative will be yet.
What I was thinking of the parking, it's very expensive parking here for a day.
Oh, absolutely.
And then you take if you're a full-time user, regular user, yeah, fine, there's some process, but if you're not a full-time user, if you're not committing to it for life, then how do you deal with parking?
Agreed. I would also expect people to, from what bits and pieces I've been in Gungahlin, I would expect bus routes to be short routes that will run to the stops along Flemington Road. Won't be any distance, so you won't be able to get to the city via a bus. You won't be able to get to the city via a bus. You will have to, like the 57 might come out, do a loop through Franklin, and then join back up at Woolworths there and drop your passengers, and you do tram for the rest of it. So the bus system will vastly different to what we're used to. And that consultation that they're not giving us is going to be absolutely critical to make sure they get that right.
Okay. So this sounds like you're repeating the conversation we had with them. So the first thing was they said, we've released the consultation, and it was like, oh, when? Well, 3 weeks ago. I didn't see it. I see all the Transport Canberra notices, but there were 628 responses to the online survey. 82% of those were users of public transport. And key findings: 80% of people would walk further if the bus was more frequent. They want the interchanges to be really nice, lighting, shelter, seating. The rapid network has been very successful, and all the rapid routes, including the new ones, have been very successful, and they've got positive feedback around that. Unsurprisingly, 60% wanted better access to buses for residents with limited mobility, and everyone wanted mobile apps and online resources to aid in journey planning. And certainly, we gave some feedback that rather than building yet another app, please build these services into existing apps so that we don't have to have yet another app.
They have.
I'm aware of that. They also took on board our feedback that we provided in our concerns around Moncrief and Jacker, better access to Casey. And so they provided us with a little hard copy. It was really fun. Can we please have this hard copy in electronic form so we can share it? No, but I'll fix that. You can scan them and you put them into Google and it gives you back the text. So what they're up to now is they're progressing towards a launch of Stage 2 in June, which will essentially put a mud map of where the routes will be, not timetables, but where the routes will be. They're conscious of the point the gentleman made around everyone will have to get a bus to get onto the light rail if you want to head towards Civic, but they're not going to make everyone take a bus that goes back to Gungahlin Town Centre if you happen to be in Franklin to catch a light rail to go past you. So there will be buses that will intersect with light rail on a more southern basis. But the key elements are simplicity, an all-day, 7-day network with the same route numbers all week. Route numbers are very likely to change. And routes that are designed to be used all week, not just during peak periods. They're going to try and minimise the amount of specialised services. They're doing a huge amount of work, apparently, with the ACT Education Department around school services. The school services currently run as a completely special project, independent of the normal bus system, and they're looking to better utilise buses as part of that. The goal is to get 95% of the population to within easy access of public transport. That's based on the notion of 500 metres to a local service stop and 800 metres to a rapid stop, noting that a rapid will also be light rail. Expansion of bus hours, better integration with existing service models, how do you deal with late nights and isolated areas. Matters raised. Okay, so specifically related to our Gungahlin issues, they're planning for new routes in the suburbs of Moncrief, Taylor and Throsby. Terrific. A new link between Crace and Palmerston Primary School. A new regional bus network with services to the town centre, including connections to the City Light Rail or to Balconnen via the proposed Black Rapid. Exploring options to link Gungahlin with other centres. A new school network for the region, building on more frequent local rapid routes. And some considerations of how do you do bus layer interchanging Gungahlin and sort of sharing that with us. So that's kind of the update. It's been 6 months coming, and the actual process of engagement in phase 2, when we'll actually see some maps and route numbers, is scheduled for middle of June. Anything else on buses?
So there's no definite dates, Peter?
Yes, we got a definite date and I wrote it down. After our next meeting, I wrote down June the 18th to kick off that next phase of consultation. They now have a dedicated person to do community engagement, and when she gets an email address, she'll be easy to contact. My sense of it was that they have not really had everything happening, and they've got a bit of a new team and a new refresh on, and they're sort of pushing through to get this done, was my sense of the meeting. I had a couple of colleagues there, Kevin and David. If you want to add anything, jump in. But we made it pretty clear that not hearing anything for 6 months wasn't great, and they promised to do better going forward. So that's where it's happening. So bus consultation still coming, but probably nothing really visible until June. Right, now, our final guest speakers who have been very patient with us. This is the danger of saying, we'll be a bit late, can you put us on later? The danger is you end up being a bit later. So we have an update from the Heart Foundation on the impact of Territory Plan Variation 438? 348. I knew I'd get it wrong. It's so tragic. PowerPoint slides, or are you good to go? Okay, right. Well, you jump up and be self-introducing, and I'll sort out the slides.
What we might do, after this last thing, getting it together. Hi, I'm Annie from the Heart Foundation.
Might get you near the microphone.
Just get you to stand up. Yeah?
It's going to be one of those.
No, it's not going to be one of those. I just see some kind of, it's that time of night. Do I stand here? Yeah? It's that time of night, and I think everyone just needs a bit of a stand up and a stretch. And, yep, everyone up and stretching, just to kind of, that's it. And then I'll get you to, we'll get the brain going, okay? So we'll go left hand, right knee. Right hand, left knee. Okay, here we go. So that's it, getting that brain. Come on, you can do it. Come on up in the back. Here we go. Now we're going to go left hand, right foot back, like a windmill. And this is very good to do in the first thing in the morning. It gets your right and left brains, sides of the brain, hemispheres working. Cool. Very good. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We have to do it, otherwise we won't get spared.
Okay. Firstly, hi. I'd just like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people on the land that we are standing with, all past, present and future generations. As what we said, my name's Annie Kentwell. I'm the Active Living Coordinator with the Heart Foundation, and I am got a background of social science education and planning. We've got Dr. Anthony Burton, who did his PhD in climate change and planning, but is a geographer, an urban health planner, and a recreational planner. And we've come together and we've worked together for about 4 years working on these issues. And you might ask, why is Heart Foundation in this space in town planning and kind of the built and natural environment? They've actually been in this space for about 18 years, and they've been working with trying to get the way that we design and build places and spaces around the place is either going to influence or discourage people from doing active living. And active living at the moment is all about getting people up and about, because our physical inactivity is increasing, and we're then very highly prone to cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, etc. So, do you want to take over from here?
Sure, I'm more than happy to. Thanks, Annie. Okay, so the Heart Foundation is involved in the built environment space, and as Annie said, essentially the built environment has an impact on how healthy and physically active one person or a population is. So you can see here, and sorry, it may be a little small, but essentially one person dies from cardiovascular disease every 12 minutes in Australia. One person dies from a heart attack every 9 minutes in Australia. So the health and wellbeing of the community is of great concern to the Heart Foundation. And indeed, heart disease is the single largest killer of people in Australia at this point in time. So I often start, and I apologise if some of you have seen this before, but I often start with this particular quote, which is, we ought to plan for our ideal city with an eye to 4 considerations. The first, as being the most indispensable, is health. And I like to ask the question, because I'm that kind of person, if anybody has any idea on who may have said that particular quote. Some people might say, oh, it's Jan Gehl in the mid-80s or late 90s. Some people might say it's Jane Jacobs, Lewis Mumford in the 1950s. Some people might say it's John Snow in the 1850s, the world's first epidemiologist. I think we can go back just a little bit further than that. Julius Caesar, close. It's close in terms of timing. It's Aristotle 2,500 years ago. So the concept of planning cities and urban spaces for human health is nothing new, but it is something that, as urban planners, many of us have forgotten. I won't dwell on the definitions that we have for health, but in effect it's a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being and not merely just the absence of disease. I won't dwell on what physical activity is. I'm sure that we're all more than well aware of it, but, 5 key things: exercise, sport, recreation, incidental physical activity, and our occupation are all areas where we can get physical activity. And probably one of the things that we're really focusing on is that incidental physical activity, that activity that you get every day without necessarily even trying. The Heart Foundation recently released a study, and they're running a campaign at the moment called
Don't Get the Sits.
Don't Get the Sits. Thank you, Annie. Basically, we sit down 15 hours a day. We're incredibly physically inactive in our society at this point in time. So part of the aim of what the Heart Foundation is about is getting people more physically active more often and meeting those physical activity guidelines, which is, do you want to know?
30 minutes.
30 minutes of physical activity a day. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes in a row. It can be 3 10-minute blocks, but getting 30 minutes of physical activity every single day.
So who could say today they've had their 30 minutes? I've had an hour. Oh, this is looking good at the back.
First time in months.
That's good. Okay, that's great. Cheers.
I didn't get my 30 minutes of physical activity today. So these statistics here are pretty alarming. 63% of the ACT population, adult population, is overweight or obese. That's from the 2016 Chief Health Officer's report. And 44% of us attain low levels of physical activity, so that we don't meet the physical activity guidelines at this point in time. The cost of physical inactivity is enormous, over $13 billion annually. So there are strategies for change, and these strategies can be the individual, but the individual can find things really challenging, so you need a supportive environment to allow the individual to make those strategies for change. And we have a campaign running, or the Heart Foundation has a campaign running at the moment. It's called Activate My Day. I don't think it's going to work, but let's see.
Has anyone heard
Oh, it does
on the
work.
radio? 266.
No. Maybe we should put the microphone next to it. So essentially, it's a social media campaign that's running at the moment, and the tagline is 2 out of 3 people.
One out of two.
Oh, 1 of 2,
Yeah.
sorry. 1 of 2 people currently don't meet the physical activity guidelines or don't get enough physical activity in their day. Which one are you?
So it's through social media as well as 2CC and 106.
You need to talk in the microphone.
It's actually through social media, so we've got the visual, and then there's a lot of happenings over the radio stations of 2CC and 106.4. So they are quite canvassing a lot of that, and we'll be doing a lot more going out to bus stations, etc. In the next few weeks. You'll be seeing people with red shirts, and whoever's doing some great stuff of jumping on public transport or walking or doing a few things, initiatives that ACT government's put forward, you'll win a prize. Yeah.
Right, all right. So the prevalence of obesity in the ACT. You can see here the areas in yellow. We have relatively low prevalence of obesity, so that's under 25%. And areas that are red on this map are over 25%. So you can see areas of Belconnen and Tuggeranong are sitting in at 25.6 and 30%. Respectively. Gungahlin is sitting in at 24.5%. Now, these figures are about 6 years old. So, if you overlay that with the prevalence of physical inactivity, you can see Gungahlin is sitting up there in the red zone, at 54.3% of people within Gungahlin, adults within Gungahlin, are not physically active enough. They're not meeting their physical activity guidelines. If we overlay that with active travel, or this is actually bicycle journeys to and from work. Does this have a pointer? I don't know if it does. Laser. Oh, look at that. I don't know if you can see that, but this is the inner north of Canberra, and we see in here areas within that inner north are getting upwards of 20 to 25% of people taking bicycle journeys to and from work. There's a whole range. It's flat. There's supportive infrastructure. There's a whole range of reasons for it, and it's relatively close to a major employment district. But you have a look out here at Gungahlin or Tuggeranong, we're talking about 2% of people taking, or less, taking journeys to and from work using active transport, using bicycle. So in effect, what we're looking at is a car-dominated environment. If we overlay that with obesity and physical inactivity prevalence, we can see that in Gungahlin, 24.5% of people are overweight or obese. In the inner north, in North Canberra, we're talking about 18.6%. So there is a correlation. We can't say that it's a direct causation, but there's definitely a correlation between those people who are taking active travel to and from work and with supportive environment to there being significantly less people who are overweight or obese. So what are we talking about when we're talking about active living? It's a way that integrates physical activity into our daily routine. It's about integrating that those levels of incidental physical activity into your daily routine. So it's also about creating urban environments that promote lifestyles that lead to fit, economically active and socially thriving communities. So we know that in those walkable communities, children are much more likely to be physically active. They're much more likely to walk to and from school, particularly when there are connected street networks and there are low levels of traffic available. We also know that living in a walkable and cyclable neighbourhood reduces the incidence of things like cardiovascular disease and diabetes and the like. So what are the 6 active living principles that we generally talk about and that we're incorporating or have been incorporated into the Territory Plan? They're safe and attractive places, environments for all, supportive infrastructure, open space, mixed land use and density, and connected places. And those are all also underpinned by a series of other factors, such as destination, healthy food, good quality open space and the like.
I was just going to say, does everyone know what the and this is not being derogatory, what the Territory Plan is? There is one, yes. It's the statutory planning It's the statutory planning document that ACT we all go by. So when you put in a DA, you have to comply with what is in the Territory Plan. So I just wanted to kind of elaborate on that because often we talk as planners and talk about the Territory Plan, but that's common knowledge and language to us, but not to every community. Yes, sir.
Plan. The first one is neighbourhood schools. Let's get rid of large schools. Let's go back to neighbourhood schools. And the second one is let's get some employment in Gungahlin.
Okay. Well, Anthony, we'll go back to these because these active living principles, and let me say these are the first. Canberra is the first jurisdiction in Australia let alone maybe the world, that has actively put over 40 changes into our statutory planning document into this to make things a lot more livable and thriving in our community. And things like that, sir, will hopefully certainly work through that will then become those available.
Are you aware of the situation where... Are you aware of the situation that Gungahlin doesn't have a major employment centre?
I'm totally, yeah.
Well, we've got ABS and immigration in Belconnen. We've got plenty in the city and across the pond. We've got Tuggeranong's got human services. We've got health in Woden. We've got nothing here. So, it contributes to the traffic problem as well. But every morning, we've got 20 or 30,000 residents
Everyone going
that have
outside.
to migrate south to just turn up to do our jobs.
Yep.
And until the government, at both federal and state level, are serious about doing something about it out here, we can have all these design guidelines or whatever we want to do, but until something is actually commutable on a push bike where I don't have to ride 25k, it's useless. And I don't mean it, I'm not trying to denigrate what you're doing, but I'm not going to ride 25k to get to my department to do work, although my body probably needs it. It's just not practical. I'm not going to get on a bike tomorrow and just start pedalling 25k. It's just not going to happen.
What about public transport?
Well, I use PT most days as it is because we've only got one car, and that works. But my wife drops me at the bus stop. I catch bus, change bus, and the bus stop's basically out the front of my other workplace. So I don't get any real exercise by doing that.
You could get off a bus stop beforehand and then walk. There's those things.
Well,
anyway,
then I've got to go from the Valley Ave all the way across to Yerrabee Pond, which then becomes a 2 kilometre walk.
Okay.
It's like the bus stopping around that is not practical. So.
Okay. I certainly hear you, and maybe when we're going through this, and there'll be more questions coming through, we can help you. But we're here to just, I guess, show you what has come into the territory plan. It is not the whole solution. It's covering commercial and residential, etc., but doesn't cover industrial, which of course you've got Mistral just up the road. But it is a starting point. Okay, so thank you. And ACT government has been willing to open up and be the first jurisdiction, working with in partnership with Heart Foundation to get this into the plan, which is a bonus. Yeah.
Yeah, Contact Canberra has a call centre here in Gungahlin. I think they're the first government employer, so they're just up the road, isn't it?
Yep. Okay,
Not sure
great.
How many people are there?
And have they talked about any other departments coming into Gungahlin?
Yeah, Wynyard House is an ACT government office space. It's 450 ACT government employees there. It holds the ACT government shopfront and a large portion of ACT shared services, who were previously in the Callum offices down in Woden.
Right.
And it's a great space.
Yeah.
That's it in terms of large-scale office space. ZCCLG promised to move a small federal agency, small to medium, I think is what his commitment was, in the current term of government, and we still remain very hopeful that will happen.
I think that's the federal government at the moment is kind of fraught with change at the moment, with even just centralising or decentralising, regionalising things out. So
yes.
So
active piece of work.
But keep going and keep on chipping away at Z.
Yeah. And one other comment too is I didn't mention when I was working before I retired, a lot of people were looking towards standing, like the adjustable desks. Would that contribute towards health if you're standing up, if you're kind of moving around? So I think the thing is people are sedentary, they're sitting down at their desks, not standing up. Is that important to be able to...
Absolutely, because as you, with the previous slide about 15 hours, that we literally sit. If you think about the amount of time, especially if we're office workers, the amount of time we're sedentary sitting in that position, which is totally unnatural. And so we need to be coming up. I've got a standing desk. All of Heart Foundation has got standing desks, and we've got the option, thank goodness, of going up and down. And we do need to move. We do need to walk to the printer and do need to move, because that's what human beings are supposed to be doing, not sitting sedentary. So if you think about 8 hours of sleep, you think about how much time you spend in the car, all of those things, watching television, sitting in front of the computer, all of those things, we really do live a very sedentary life these days.
you have seen some recent activity by the government, I guess what was the old LDA, where you did have a commercial precinct at Precinct 2B up the road there, which has now folded, and that's now massive apartment development,
Oh, yeah,
so
right.
residences.
Yeah.
You've got the old home hardware site there.
Yes.
And that
Martin.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think
No,
that's
Magnet
been
Mart.
idle for further development and probably apartments.
Apartments.
So apartments are more profitable for developers and more profitable for ACT government with development fees and rates. So unfortunately, the opportunity for business and employment in regional areas is shrinking because of the dollar value of apartments.
Well, we might go on to that one because there's kind of a pros and cons to that one, and that's about with apartments. I'll let you explain about density. Yeah, about density. And I've just come back from Tuggeranong today, literally from here, taking some people around for a walk around it. And of course, we suffer from here in Canberra, especially urban sprawl. And I mean, it's really has been built. Canberra has been built around the car. And what we can't do now is with any infrastructure anymore, keep on going out and out and out. And with every city, and I know as much as people don't want, we can't afford the half-acre block anymore, or the blocks are getting smaller, and the densification is happening because we need to fit more people in a certain area and to get people activated. And this is where I could go on, but I'm going to hand it over to my partner in crime to tell more. He's much smarter than I am.
Excellent. No, Annie, I'm not. Yeah, actually, when you mentioned sprawl, I used to work in the Planning and Land Authority many years ago now, nearly 20 years ago now. And one of the senior planners, I went to a conference in the States that I paid for and went to, and we were talking very much about sprawl. I came back and did a major presentation to all the senior executives, and I described Canberra as sprawl. And this senior executive said, "Anthony, that's a career-limiting move. There is no sprawl here in Canberra. It's all planned." That's kind of, I left soon after that to a PhD to look at other things. Anyway, cut a long story short, there are 43 changes to the territory plan, and we can provide you with a copy of all of those changes so that you can actually see what they are. So when we talk about those 6 active living principles, and we'll get to density and mixed use and density in a little while, but we talk about connected places, so that provides easy and safe access to work and to education, shopping and recreational venues. So it's about providing those connections between there. We talk about high quality open space. We talk about mixed use and land density, and I'll focus on that in a little while. So that's where we provide a mix of land uses and densities, so different heights and different scales. That creates variety and economic interest, as well as street activations and multiple destinations. Safe and attractive places, I think that kind of speaks for itself. Supportive infrastructure, there we're talking about the public domain that supports physical activity. So we're talking about high quality paths. You know, at the moment, or previously, many of the paths we would see in and around suburbs, if indeed we have footpaths in suburbs, are only 1.2 metres wide, and that's not wide enough for me to walk next to Annie and have a conversation. So we need to talk about wider paths and actually providing paths in and around, and environments for all, to allow for an ageing population, people with disabilities and kids. So if we talk about mixed use and density, we can see there that there is strong evidence that locating residential densities, that the location of residential densities, access to public transport, longer commute times and the like really can contribute to car dependency and sedentary behaviour. So if we build an environment that is low density, sprawling with no destinations, no local shops, no local schools, that's when we have a car-dependent society, and that leads to sedentary behaviour. Where there is a good mix of land use and density, there is strong evidence that says that it enhances walking and cycling and economic activity. Some of you have probably driven past this particular building here, and there's a great little thing there. It says, for those that can't read it down the back, it says Faulty Towers. This is a single-use building on a very busy road, very close to a major public transport route. There's a significant student accommodation right next door, but this is a single-use building. Tall, unappealing, whole range of issues with this particular building. This building has a similar number of apartments within it. It is, so I can live in this particular apartment. I can shop down here. I can go to the bank across the road, get my coffee from here, and I can catch public transport in this particular location.
Is that America?
That is.
Yeah, the hotels are driving on the wrong side of the road.
They are. You know what? I can flip the picture around. Yeah. I have seen people park like that here too, for sure. But you know, basically, it's a different kind. It's not the standard kind of development that we have seen in the past. It's about changing it up. It's about putting density in the right locations with the right facilities that really start to encourage people. So active travel is a form of travel that form of transport that deliberately gets you to a destination by walking, cycling, or catching public transport. And we know that respondents to a survey in Canberra in 2015 said that they would prioritise improving safety, especially for walking, and better connected pathways and off-road cycle lanes and paths to encourage increased walking and cycling behaviour. So people are keen for it, we're just not investing in it at this point in time. Often what we see in our environment are things like this, where we prioritise cars at major intersections over people. So there's an intersection near the ANU, where if I want to continue walking straight ahead, and if I follow the road rules, which I always do, I have to turn 570 degrees to continue going straight ahead. Now that's crazy. So no one in their right mind, no engineer in their right mind would design something like that if they were not sitting behind the wheel of a car. We've got lots of freeway conditions. We have lots of long blocks, which means that to maybe get to a bus stop, I might only live, as the crow flies, 80 metres from the bus stop. So I sit within that 500 metre goal, but I may have to walk 800 metres because of the nature of the blocks themselves. And you know, there's a whole range of other issues. So how do we get past these barriers to that connected kind of city? We need to look at making those or planning our urban environments from here, not from here. We need to look at it from the perspective of the walker and not from the perspective of the driver. We know that when we do plan and build walkable neighbourhoods, it increases retail values. We had a gentleman here who's running a business here on Hibberton Street, and was talking about the importance of foot traffic. So we need to, the importance of foot traffic is very high. Essentially, we need to build particularly our economic hubs around foot traffic, because foot traffic is what drives economic activity. If I'm driving past, I'm sitting on my wallet. I can't actually get my wallet out and spend. We know also that the monetary benefit attributed to the economy for every kilometre that you walk is $2.08. Most of that comes back in health money, but there's a whole range of other things. And for cycling, it's up to $1.12 per kilometre spent, per kilometre ridden, comes back to the community. So we've got a series of advisory documents. Annie has them here, which really go through and explain at least some of the changes, and we can provide the 43 changes to the team, so you can put it up on the website. Kevin, you've got a question? Just wait just 1 minute. Almost there. So these are the 6 active living principles. They're the first time, this is the first jurisdiction in Australia that's incorporated health right the way into the strategic planning. New South Wales has put it in their strategic directions, but this is actually woven into the everyday practice that planners have to do. However, the challenge is how it is going to be implemented. Now, it might be difficult to actually see this picture, and I promise this is the last slide. It might be difficult to actually see this picture, but here we've got 2 laneways. We've got one laneway that's quite wide and open, sunny, but we've got some apartments here, we've got some other apartments here, we've got a nice low hedge here. Here we've got a 6 foot high paling fence, actually I think it's 2.1 metres high, paling fence, unkept area. The reality is this photo is taken at exactly the same time in exactly the same location, just turned 180 degrees. These buildings here were approved exactly the same time as these buildings here. These two.
I didn't do it.
I didn't. Oh. I probably did something. Anyway, those two developments, or those 2 spaces, are in exactly the same location. They're just the way that the territory plan has been interpreted means that we get 2 completely different results.
And which laneway would you prefer to walk down?
Left.
This is a trick question.
It is.
Yep, and Peter? Yeah, and that's what we're saying about safe and attractive. That's a really good example of safe and attractive places.
But so if we don't interpret the territory plan, or if the planners do not interpret the territory plan appropriately, we can get perverse and poor outcomes, as we have in that location. So fantastic that the territory plan has been amended. What's really important now is that we continue to work with the government, continue to talk with our MLAs and the bureaucrats to make sure that when they are actually approving developments, that we don't get these perverse outcomes that we have here. I think Kevin had a question first, and then we'll. He's got it.
I've got great work that you're trying to do, and I fully support it. Right. But there is a really, really, really simple way in which you can do something immediately that will make a difference, and that is to lobby very hard to get more money spent on footpaths. Right? It's a really simple thing to do, and the way in which you can justify it, you've got your numbers there now, $2 a kilometre. They're all good on economics, these guys. Yep. So why don't you do some numbers and show that we should spend at least as much money per hour walked, if you like, on our footpaths as we're doing on roads. Now, get it up from 1% up to say 5% or something.
Well, you know, the government's current goals for active travel sits in and around 7%. And we don't get anywhere near 7%. We get about 4% at this point in time. And that's footpaths, and that's so we're talking. Their goal is 7% of people taking active travel, which is, I think, an outrageously low number. and is a number that actually allows for the government to fail. We can tinker around the edges and say, oh, you know, we tried, you know, we spent $1,000 here and $10,000 there, and we built $1 million worth of infrastructure over here. But, you know, we tried really hard to get that 7%, but it was just too hard. What they really need to be doing is aiming for something like 30% and funding it to allow for that. And if they only get to 15%, they failed miserably only getting to 15%, but the reality is that's way better, in fact twice as good as 7%. You know, so yes, it needs to be funded. There needs to be a bigger goal, and it needs to be funded appropriately. I'd agree.
And don't worry, we are lobbying. Yeah.
Okay. I was just going to finish off on Kevin's point there.
Here you go.
In the Territory, I don't know if it's well advertised, but they've changed some of the regulation a bit about mixed-use paths, footpaths, cycle paths, where there is really no such thing in the ACT as a dedicated cycle path. And in fact, recent legislation has mandated that all cycleways, all cyclists on mixed-use paths must give way to pedestrians. So essentially, the footpaths are everywhere, and some of them are wide enough for cyclists. So, you know, don't feel like there are cycleways dominating everywhere, because there aren't.
Yeah, that's correct. Everything is a mixed-use path, except in certain legislated locations where it is a cycle-only path, which is the city cycleway being that one. So.
Yeah, because I've got some doubts about that. When I'm walking over to Belconnen, which I try and do 2 or 3 times a week, the cyclists just go ding ding, coming through. They're certainly not making it too much of an allowance for me on my feet.
Again, that's legislated.
Well, I'm not sure they're going to. That's how this way.
They must ding you to let you know there's a bike coming behind you, and that's a legislated requirement.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that I think that they get priority over me.
There is a kind of road hierarchy, and it goes pedestrians, cyclists, public transport, and then vehicles.
Service vehicles.
Service vehicles.
And
then vehicles.
Then single-use cars.
Yeah, single-use cars.
Sure. Yeah,
So pedestrians are the ones, number one, in the heartland of the road hierarchy.
Too easy. Just one comment. Does the ACT, I know there's places over in the US where some of the local community are encouraged to grow fruit trees in their suburbs. Do you know if there's anywhere in Australia where that's encouraged as a community initiative?
You can actually do it here.
I know here a lot of people harvest nuts.
Yep.
Off the grounds in autumn.
Yep. That's a little left field.
Yeah.
Left field.
But that's nutrition is part of the heart.
Absolutely.
It is part of it. Yeah.
It is. And the recent changes to the regulations now allow you to grow or to apply to grow food on your nature strip. So you can do that, unless you're in a heritage precinct, in which case you can't.
So,
Very good. Support your work wonderfully. But it would appear to me, as I've been watching and listening to the community myself as a person that lives here, that your principles of active living, a lot of them are accommodated by a close proximity to work and home. It was stated quite clearly there in your principles that long commutes and long distances promote a sedentary lifestyle. It would appear, based on the questions that we've received in the room and a general consensus of the problem here in Gungahlin, that the community you're addressing, is that one of the main problems is a lack of industry, a lack of public service, a lack of departments that specifically seem to avoid Gungahlin. Love your work, but I would suggest that you're aiming too low. That if the Heart Foundation has an ounce of lobbying potential or some principles that it cares about, that it focuses it in that area, which is the elephant in the room, that all Gungahlin, like the gentleman there says, faces a 30-minute to 60-minute commute, and they're shagged by the time they get to work, and they're shagged by the time they get home, and there's nothing nothing that they want to do except sit down. So a bit of encouragement, please apply your lobbying potential and your active living principles, which make uncommon good common sense, towards this elephant in the room, which is bring industry to Gungahlin and there will be a byproduct of benefit.
Yep. I'll take that on board.
We'll take it on board.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, there needs to be employment close to where people live. That's
It'll be a sense of community. People can live and work and shop in their community, and their schools are distributed, and their health facilities are contributed. You'll have no reason to have to face that 30 to 60 minute grinding commute. And there's only a few fanatics like some of us that will cycle into work.
Who will utilise, if that happens, who will utilise the light rail, the tram, then?
It won't go anywhere near. It won't go anywhere near my work.
So the answer to that is, if we do have an employment in Canberra, it'd be the people coming from living
From
north
there
and South
to
Canberra
up there, and then
in
coming
fact,
back.
It's crucial that a light rail connects.
That's an environmental thing, light rail. That's not health related.
No, it is health related.
How does light rail help my heart?
It is. It's
doesn't.
very.
You have to walk to the light rail.
It's all about.
It is. It's active travel.
Yeah. So public transport. You often bookend a public transport trip with a 5 to 10 minute walk. If you do that, so you get that 5 minute or 10 minute walk to your public transport stop in the morning. You have a 10-minute walk at lunchtime. You have a 10-minute walk off your public transport at the end, and there's your 30 minutes.
The principle I'm talking about is Gungahlin has a specific problem, and everyone knows about it. And until someone does something about it, and other people continue to complain and beat the desk.
But you have to also lobby.
Not
just here. You've got to bang the hat against the MLAs.
We face an entrenched government.
So, thank you very much, Annie. Thank you very much, Anthony. That's very useful.
We will put these. I'll send the link to these documents.
That'd be great.
And etc. to you, Peter, and then they can be loaded up.
Yep, we'll whack them on the website. Look, the issue of employment in Gungahlin is clearly a number one issue. The killer is, who do you lobby? It's essentially the employer. You have to lobby. I beg your pardon? Barnaby Joyce. That may be it, but that is the problem. You've got to get an employer to move their organisation here, and the vast majority of departmental secretaries want to be near the centre of Canberra. The federal government has stopped investing in large-scale new developments in Canberra, and it hasn't done so for 20 years. So that model of a big government agency in each of the town centres hasn't materialised. It's hard to get it back. And so, short of putting something else here, it's very hard. Now that doesn't mean we don't stop and keep trying. So we'll keep doing that. It's over time. We might like to finish by 8:30. Thank you for all persevering to the end, including those who are online. Been great talks tonight. Thank you very much, Annie. Thank you, Anthony, and to Ben McHugh for his annual beating. We'll see you all in June. Thanks very much.